The Koenigers used party balloons, helium balloons, plastic bags, plastic balloons or garbage bags, I guess, filled with helium, suspending a queen below or queen pheromone in a cotton. No queen was harmed in this operation, kind of thing, except that she died when she was put in the alcohol. And you can see the little dark spots. Those are drones. You will get drones attracted anytime you put a balloon like this up in a flyway. We don't talk about flyways too much, but a flyway is where the bees, it's the interstate highway in the sky the bees are using to go to and from drone congregation areas, nectar crops, pollen areas. And when you get into an area where there's a lot of drones, now you're in the DCA. When a queen mates, her median oviduct, do you see that bottom there says median oviduct? Fills like it's been described as Bugs Bunny ears. They swell up large, the ovaries are smaller and the median oviducts swell up. They're filled with semen and mucus. And the semen migrates into that spermatheca you see there, that sphere. And they are then going to be stored there for as long as that queen lives or the sperm are viable. Okay, let's just, all right, so here you see a side view and a front view, or from the top view. And there are about 370 of these little egg-laying devices that are called ovarioles. And we're going to talk about how important it is that we have a big queen when we're raising queens. The bigger the queen, the more ovarioles. The more ovarioles, the higher the egg-laying rate. I like a queen that produces about 1,500 eggs per day. When I ran the old genetics program for Dana and Harvey York, we had crosses that produced as many as 1,800 eggs per day. But when we measured the egg-laying rate versus the honey they produced more honey and they ate more honey. So 1,500 eggs per day is, in my mind, an optimal number for a productive hive that's going to give a commercial beekeeper more frames of honey. So you don't have so many bees that it takes more honey just to maintain that colony in terms of population strength. All right, we said that. All right, here's the dissection from USDA. It's a great slide. Shows the ovaries filled with the ovarioles, the oviduct with an egg in it, the two lateral oviducts. You can kind of see the tube that goes down toward that sphere, which is the spermatheca. The spermatheca is clear, but it's covered with tracheoles. It's being oxygenated, and there's a spermathecal duct on there. Talk about fancy science. Gudrun Koeniger would open up a queen, snip the spermathecal duct so it wasn't benefiting the sperm, and then put the queen back together, put it in the hive, and the queen stopped producing viable eggs. They weren't fertilized. So that spermathecal duct was keeping the sperm alive and healthy with whatever it produces. All right. Can you see the thumbnail there with a little tiny sphere on it? That is a spermatheca from a queen this beekeeper is checking. And he is going to take and very carefully rub his fingers on that spermathecal duct to remove the tracheoles. If the spermatheca is clear, the virgin never mated. If it's cloudy or brown or tan, it's mated. And the level of the darkness would indicate how many sperm are in there. So if you killed a really viable queen, she's going to have a dark tan, kind of the color of that pegboard over there. If you've got a milky white spermatheca, there are just a few thousand sperm in that, either remaining or that's all she ever had. But this beekeeper called it field stripping a queen. All right, no joke. Okay, drone congregation areas, the actual areas where bees are concentrating, you need to have some idea where they are, and sometimes you'll find that your bee yard is there, because you'll see drones flying from the sky, hitting the ground. Now, they don't stay there, especially in Florida where you are, because the fire ants will carry them off right away. But even here in Pennsylvania, the ants are going to pretty well take care of any falling drones. But if you see them coming down, you don't have to know where they are. It's just that it's nice to have an idea where they are. But keep in mind that in a typical 40-acre farm, you may have 5 or 6 DCAs. Wow, that's a lot of drones. Because it takes about 10,000 drones to maintain one DCA. So you start doing the math and you say, well, I guess I have drones from that beekeeper and my bees and those bee trees and everything else. So it becomes a real concern. You have enough drones to keep that many DCAs going. Yeah.
Do they know about how many drones are typically, like, is there about how many that she'll look to keep as a population in that colony?
The question is how many drones will a colony maintain?
200, 50, 100. Is there a number where?
I think the number of drones in a colony depends upon the strength and health of that colony. And the worker bees are going to tolerate a lot more in the spring than they will in the summer. And certainly at this time of year, they're throwing them all out, sending them to Florida. You taking them back on an express flight?
I will on tomorrow's
Okay. All right. So I think that the question boils down to is how do bees determine the number of drones that they need? And I think if you look at, it's a function of really one thing with a modifier. That one thing is the population of the colony. Stronger colonies have more drones. Smaller colonies have fewer. But the modifier would be that if that colony is going through a period of queen change, primarily supersedure or maybe swarming, that they're going to tolerate more drones at that time of the year. We would maintain drones in queenless colonies. We remove a queen, and then we'd put a caged virgin in that colony. And we're trying to produce the same conditions that you'd have during supersedure, where you've got a young queen, lots of drones, and lots of brood, or hopefully lots of brood in supersedure. And we would use this to keep our drones happy and well fed when we used the drones for instrumental insemination. Keep in mind, we had, I think, 13 or 14 inbred lines. Each one of those lines had to be maintained separately to keep the bloodlines pure. And the fastest way to get fired in my operation is to forget to write down which queen it was that those drones came from, because we couldn't use those drones. They were wasted. And we may have spent hundreds or thousands of dollars to maintain those drones in production. So it was a cost in any kind of breeding program. All right, just to finish up on the mating, here's a cage where there's either a caged virgin or some queen pheromone in there, and the drones go up in there and they're trapped. And by doing that, you can mark the drones, come back and resample. This is all very complicated. And go back to the same yards year after year after year. And you find that the drones tend to stay close to home. That's what this slide's showing you. And the queens fly a distance away from home. What's that doing? It's preventing inbreeding. Questions on that?
Do queens naturally avoid
We don't know if they naturally, I mean, if there's a repellency, oh, you're my brother, I can't mate with you. Or it's more of a, I'm going to fly away from where my brothers instinctively would go to mate. And there's probably some inbreeding, regardless of however Mother Nature is preventing that. There's probably some happening anyway. All right, so I mentioned the use of mechanical drones to study all of this. So I expect to see lots of good data coming out as the drones are taken out of military use and put into civilian use. Yes?
What is the distance a queen will fly to a drone area?
What is the question?
That a queen will fly.
How far will a queen fly? A mile or more. And the drones will fly a few hundred yards. So that's a simple fix for preventing inbreeding, mating with your brothers.
So all of the drones die at the autumn, right?
At mating, yes.
The new drones from the springtime, they have no idea. Nobody can tell them when that DCA is.
Yeah, there's no writing on the walls of the beehive.
How do they know?
It's the $64 question of mating biology. How do they know where these things are? Okay, I think I've done a good job of covering this basic biology. Now I want to talk about you raising some queens. Well, I did throw a few other things here. Queen finding, you've all found queens, right? You know you have to be systematic, box by box, bottom board, lid, bottom box, one side to the other, both sides of the frames, second box, you have to be systematic. I like to mark queens. Better yet, I like the queens that I'm looking for to be marked. But keep in mind what I said earlier. In the spring, expect about 20% of your hives to have 2 queens or more. So you have to keep looking for more queens once you find one. And that's where most beekeepers get into trouble with all this. Queen introduction. I'm a stickler for this. You don't take a queen and run her in the entrance. Some beekeepers recommend that. I want that queen to be held in that colony in a cage that she cannot get out for 4 to 5 days between 2 frames of brood. So if she's in a JZBZ cage, which Mann will gladly sell you some, with a candy plug and a cap on it, you come back in 5 days, take off the cap, make sure the candy hasn't turned into concrete, and let the bees chew that queen out. So you're not there, the hive's not open when that queen comes out. Remember, she's a virgin queen. She could do that off into the air thing. So you want her to emerge maybe at night, but certainly within the hive, and now she can go into the normal behaviors that you want for her to mate. If you're using queens of a particular type, something new to your operation, let's say you've got all Italians, you buy some Russians or some Carniolans or something, spend more time holding those queens before you release them. I'm not saying bees are racist. They just seem to do a better job of accepting queens of the same genetic type as they are. Weight of the queen. I wanted to spend a lot of time on this, and I'm not going to. The heavier the queen, the more ovarioles. Tibor Szabo, researcher in Canada, I was able to visit his operation in Ontario after he retired from the government, federal government in Canada. And he and his son, now Thibault's no longer with us, but his son Tibby is still raising queens. They weighed every queen in a glass vial on a scientific scale to measure her weight at emergence. And anything below a certain point, and I can't remember what the weight was, they would pinch, they would not use in their operation. It was a way of culling out small queens. I want to have somebody here develop a caliper that you measure the thorax of the queen, you know, between the wings, so she's got a big thorax. And if it's too small, you pinch that queen. So I'll mention that. Queen quality, this just came out. I'm going to do this. I'm just going to let you write this down or take a photo of it. I mean, this came out last week. Queen quality, performance, and winter survival of imported queens that were brought in from New Zealand, California, Hawaii, California, and locally raised in Canada. Is it any surprise to you that the queens that came from New Zealand were the smallest? Why? More days in shipment. And their acceptance rate was reduced as a result. So go back to my introduction instructions, spend more time putting that queen into a colony and let her swell up before she's released. That's one solution I can give you. The other thing that's important that you keep in mind is that the highest success rate of these queens in this study were the Canadian queens, locally raised queens. And for all of you here that want to raise queens, bravo and brava, because you want to raise a queen that's bigger, has never swollen, and never shrunk down to a point where she's no good. And so you've got this as an operational thing. So I don't want to get into all of this. So textbooks that are references for you to consider. And then we're going to have a talk about queen rearing. Only humble that I say people tell me this is the best queen rearing book. Queen Rearing Essentials by that Connor guy. How many of you already have it? Good, thank you. I appreciate that. Companion book that helps with this in terms of making nukes and mating nukes and so forth, Increase Essentials. How many of you have this? Thank you. The Mating Biology, or Bee Sex Essentials. I recommend that so you understand what's going on. And then finally, we tried to include a lot of material in the third edition of Honeybee Biology and Beekeeping, Dewey, Karen, and I wrote. This is our COVID homework. So we added 100 pages, new chapters, and we did expand things like queen rearing and making nukes on that. The deal of the day when we get done here is this book, which normally sells for $90, I'll sell it to you for $75 if you buy any of the other Wickwass titles. So you save $15. All right. May or may not help you in your decision making. All right, I want to talk, where are we on time? I got an hour, okay? I don't know how much time we want to spend talking about this queen rearing operation that you're going to set up. How many of you are raising queens already? About 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, I want you all to take this on as a responsibility next year, unless you're going to Florida this month. But you probably won't raise any queens until next year anyway, because the queen season is over in Florida. I kept bees in Florida for 5 years, and we knew that in January, the end of January, we could start raising queens if we had drones. The limiting factor in Florida for rearing queens is drones. The limiting factor in your area will be a healthy drone supply, because none of you are doing instrumental insemination that I'm aware of, and I'm not recommending it. It's a whole other technology that's still got challenges. Will be nice. All right. You are going to probably want to select breeder queens from the records that you have from this year. Or you're going to buy breeder queens from someone like John Harbaugh who will sell them to you for hundreds of dollars, and you'll be lucky if you can get them for 2024, because he probably already has a list for 2025 started. It's a finite production of these instrumentally inseminated breeder queens. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, why do I need to spend that money? Can't I take the best colony I've got and graft? Yes. There's no guarantee that her daughters are going to be as good as the mother, but that's where you start. Or you may take the best 5 or the best 10% of your operation. If you've got 100 colonies, take your 10 best colonies and use them for grafting next year. Or queen cell production. So you may want to decide, am I going to learn to graft, or am I going to learn to use queen cells the bees are producing naturally? So those swarm cells, and occasionally a forced supersedure cell, or as Langstroth did, you dequeen a colony and go in and take out the cells and use those. Is there anything wrong with those cells? No. You may have to cut around the cells, and there are a number of systems out there, and I can't even tell you all the different methods that are online in YouTube videos. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the mechanics of you raising queens, as to tell you, you have to think about the philosophy that you're going to have in place. Yeah, question here.
So what determines my best 10%? Is that just egg production of the queen?
I think I used a selection index. If you want to be, you rank every queen or every colony for 3 or 4 factors. The first factor is, I don't like this colony because I have to put a veil on to work it, or I have to wear gloves, or I have to put on a full bee suit, or I think these are African bees and I don't want to propagate from them. So, and that's a full fault. They're out of the breeding program. It could stay in your bee yard, but you may not even want to raise drones from them. The second thing I would look at are criteria of productivity. So egg-laying rate is one, but there's a correlation between the amount of pollen a colony gathers, the amount of honey a colony gathers, and the amount of brood that a colony produces. More bees, more pollen, more honey. So if you select for honey production, which is, all right, you weigh the hives, all the hives at the same day in the season, or you take 2 weights, and you rank them 1 through 10 or 1 through 100, and take your best 10%. That gives you a fairly quick way of selecting the ones that are doing a good job of production. Commercial beekeepers would take and graft for 1 line of bees and 1 group of colonies, and a second line of bees for another group. Put all the honey from group A on 1 truck and all of the honey from the group B on another truck, weigh the trucks, know how much the trucks weighed, and that was how they figured out what their weight was. And they would pick the one that was the best honey producer. So whatever method you wanted to do to evaluate honey production, if that's what you are after, is honey production. Not everybody is. If you're after pollen production or pollination, it has to be a little more sophisticated. Selection index, the third factor might be how strong they came through the winter, some other criteria that you have. And now you rank them, and the one that comes out A all the way across the board, you know your grafting mother. If you've got a mixture, you kind of assign a 1, 2, 3, or a 3, 2, 1, the number with the highest or lowest score. Well, it's golf or basketball. So you want to come up with a method of evaluating those queens as a result. These are finely tuned processes. Most of you are going to go out there and evaluate the colonies on the basis of honey production, lack of stings, ease of manipulation, and I'll throw in mite tolerance. lowest mite counts. That would be the other one I look at nowadays. You could expand that mite thing into looking for low numbers of mites, but high numbers of mites with damage where they've been chewed. The ankle biters, where they've got, the bees are actually biting the mite. So those are two factors that you need to factor into this nowadays. Because if you can eliminate a treatment, if you're doing 3 treatments a year and you can go to 2, that's saving you money and time. All right. Now, are you going to graft? Are you going to raise queens using some other method? Well, I'm going to suggest to you that you try a few things your first year. The people that are raising queens, who's grafting? Anybody? You're grafting with good success?
I'd say so.
Yeah. What, 80% take?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Good. So you're in a good. So you want to talk to this guy and see what he's doing, if you're in a neighborhood. Anybody else? Yes.
About 75, 80.
All right. Well, I'd say you're winning the game. How many of you have played with some other method, notching or something else? Yes. Pardon? Double screen. All right. So you're moving combs up in the below, looking for swarm cells. Okay. Anybody using a Langstroth type method where you dequeen colonies? Yeah.
What's your take on OTS?
Well, on what?
On the spot?
Oh, on the spot where you notch the. If it works for you, go for it. Does it work for you?
I've done several.
You've done several. Okay. All right. I am not against any method. I want you to work on producing the biggest queens you can, and whatever system is going to work for you. What's my system nowadays? I go out and look at queen cells in my colonies, and I do a doolittle increase, make new nukes, because I'm now trying to keep my colony count under 10. And I've had some roller coaster issues with health, and so the last couple of years, I'm letting the bees repopulate my colonies through swarming. That's not my plan, but it worked. It kept me in the bee business. Anybody else? I am delighted to see you all here, and I wish you all well in terms of whatever you end up doing with queens and beekeeping. It's an amazing hobby. And just keep in mind what Dr. Eva Crane said. She's established the International Bee Research Association. We're all beginners for the first 20 years. Thank you all very much.